Welcome back to the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling Podcast, your favorite mix of insider takes, hot tags, and marital squabbles over who popped harder for a Canadian destroyer. I'm Mr. Wrestling, flying solo this week. Well, sort of. Mrs. Wrestling is out on assignment, scouting talent, closing deals. So just like in the ring, we pivot. And when it's time to pivot, we form a monster tag team, baby. Think of the Road Warriors. Think of Tully and Arn. Think of FTR with matching jackets and old school psychology. That's right. Stepping in this week, the enforcer himself, my guy Joe.
Let's go. You know I've been waiting to run in from the apron for weeks now. Mrs. Wrestling left some big shoes to fill, but I brought the steel chair and ice cold Steve Weisers, so we're good.
This week, we're hitting a full All Elite episode, breaking down AEW Dynamite, Collision, and previewing AEW Dynasty. We've got predictions, chaos, probably a few too many references to the late 90s. Basically, we're giving you a super kick party with some real talk tucked in. Let's ring the bell. Hold up, hold up. Before we start the show, we got to address something.
Yeah, the fact that you still don't own our merch.
Disrespectful, honestly. You listen every week. You yell at your phone when I'm right.
You mean when you think you're right?
Either way, you're not repping the brand. That's a problem.
Big problem, because the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast shirts on Pro Wrestling Tees, main event material.
Soft, comfortable, championship level drip.
Perfect for Raw, perfect for Dynamite, perfect for sitting on the couch judging creative decisions like you book the territory.
And let's be honest, when you walk into a show wearing our logo,
You're basically saying I've got elite taste.
who's your favorite wrestling podcast?
Who runs the hot takes?
Who brings the chaos every week?
Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling. So stop playing.
Search Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling on Pro Wrestling Tees.
Grab the shirt
Join the movement.
and look better than Mr. Wrestling while you're at it.
Okay, wow. We're ending strong.
We are ending strong in our merch.
All right, so we're going to start this week's episode off with AEW Dynamite, and we had a 6-man tag match. So we had the Don Callis family, which was Andrade, Konosuke Takeshita, and Mark Davis, defeating Bandito, Darby Allin, and Jack Perry. This match was 11 minutes and 38 seconds. Meltzer gave it 4.25 stars. Joe, what did you think of this?
It was a fun opener, especially coming off of that big angle to start the show that led to the main event that we'll talk about. But yeah, I mean, all these guys are great, big spots during the match. Interesting that they had Andrade pin Jack Perry, who is, the current national champion. So I think that's obviously going to foreshadow something we're going to see here in the near future. But I mean, it was a great, nothing but action, and it furthers storylines.
Yeah, I think Andrade's continuing to look like a massive star, and he's having a fantastic year. Mark Davis has been great, even since, the injury where, they lost, Doyle. He's really stepped it up. I like the, throwback varsity jacket that he has on. That's pretty sweet. And, anytime you get Bandito in there with Takeshita and Andrade, you're going to get something special. But, definitely a lot of things brewing. I liked how Okada threw himself in there at the very end. And, it looked like, man, Takeshita and Okada are going to get it together. They're going to form that Mega Powers tag team. And it lasted like 30 seconds, if that.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like you're in for a good one, though, for Double or Nothing, because part of the agreement, with them tagging up coming up here was Okada and Takeshita for the title at Double or Nothing. So
yeah, that's going to be great. I'm so glad we're finally getting that payoff. It's been over a year, but certainly going to be exciting to see in person.
No doubt it's going to be a heck of a match. And the build should be great, too, with both of those guys hating each other.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Don Callis plays these sides.
No doubt.
And then we had an AEW TBS title match. Willow Nightingale defeated Queen Aminata in 11 minutes and 6 seconds. What did you think of this one, Joe?
It wasn't terrible. I mean, it didn't click. I think they tried to set it up like it was a big title match, but I mean, Aminata just came back, from injury. Willow's, she's been beat up a little bit as well. I mean, it was fine, but it wasn't anything, nothing you need to go out of your way to see, to watch.
Yeah, Queen Aminata looked good. She looked the part. But I think Willow needs that heel presence across from her to really bring out the most in her and, really play up, the type of wrestler that she is. And, I felt like that was missing. I would have liked to have seen this go to like, Julia or Sky Blue to keep that little, feud going and, give them a shot and give them that showcase on AEW Dynamite.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Willow's great. She just, I almost wonder if they're just holding back here until maybe Mercedes comes back. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting now that she's beltless. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where Mercedes goes. Is it going to be for the TBS title? Is she going to be inserted into, the world title picture? Could she possibly look to be the first, back-to-back winner of the Owen Hart Cup? That would be
Yeah.
something interesting too, as technically that's the only title she has left is that, and it's, essentially not really a title.
Yeah, more like a trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Things to keep your eye on. Then we had a Casino Gauntlet number one spot match. So this person that won this match is going to be the first entrant into the Casino Gauntlet match for the now vacated TNT title. Kyle Fletcher looks to have torn his meniscus, so he's going to be out a while. So another huge blow to AEW. Meltzer gave this 3 3/4 of a star, and Tommaso Ciampa defeated Mascara Dorada in 11 minutes and 2 seconds. I really enjoyed this match. I thought Dorada, stood out like he always does when he shows up in AEW, and him and Ciampa were able to mesh very well together. And it still blows my mind that Dorada is under 25, and the fact that they got him locked up to a dual contract is a huge get for them. And it definitely seems like AEW is positioning Ciampa like he's going to be the winner for this gauntlet match.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, barring, a surprise, someone coming back or a debut. I thought the match itself was really good. I think early on there, I don't know if it was communication issues, but it looked like they weren't on the same page there for the first couple minutes, but they really got it back on track. And I love the finish. Anytime Ciampa hits that knee, it looks brutal. So, and about Dorada, I mean, like you said, he's young. If Mystico was not in CMLL, he would be their top guy. He's the number 2 babyface in CMLL. So the future's bright for him, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Ciampa's going to win the gauntlet match, but I think AEW wants you to think that he's the favorite. And, next, we'll get into it a little bit later on, surprise entrance, but, I think they've got some things, up their sleeves. And I think with the injury to Fletcher, Tony Khan's going to go all out for this.
I agree. I think we're going to see a lot of, hopefully they utilize some of the guys from their partnerships here.
Yeah. Then we had a Chaos in Canada 8-man tag match. So this was the main event. It was, the returning United Empire. So the newly crowned youngest ever IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, Callum Newman, Francisco Akira, Hinare, and the recently returned Will Ospreay. They picked up the win over the Death Riders. So this was Claudio Castagnoli, Daniel Garcia, John Moxley, and Pac. Meltzer gave this 4.5 stars, and it was 20 minutes and 50 seconds. It was great to see Newman so fresh after winning the world title to show up with that beautiful IWGP world title and, giving New Japan that rub and, getting us prepped for Forbidden Door, really showing that partnership fresh off the rumors that Will Ospreay is going to be wrestling more in Japan. So, exciting news there. And, just a really great main event match.
Agreed. And a little background for everybody that doesn't watch New Japan. So when Callum Newman won the belt from Yota Tsuji not that long ago, a few days ago, they were celebrating in the back, doing the promo and the press conference. And Will had pulled Callum aside and said, "Hey, I got some trouble in the States. I'm going to need your help." So that led to the opening angle of the show, which Will was getting beat up, by the Death Riders, and then the Black SUV pulls up and United Empire's in there. So that led to this main event, a little bit of background there. But this match was kind of worked like Anarchy in the Arena style match. Everyone's brawling all over the place, big spots everywhere, power moves. It was a really fun match to watch. It didn't feel like 20 minutes, I could tell you that much. So it was a solid match. Everybody worked hard, and and again, you're furthering the story, and you got the singles match coming up at the pay-per-view, which we'll talk about here shortly. But I thought it was great, and like I said, I'm with you, Steve. It was good to see Newman fresh off that big win, against Yota Tsuji, and Hinari got over big, in this match. I think he was kind of the sleeper of the whole group. So it was fun to watch. I loved it.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised that they had Akira in there and not the Great Okan. Not sure what that was about. But yeah, it was fantastic. I'd love to see Newman defend the title against, a Claudio or a Pac in New Japan. It doesn't have to be on the biggest show of the year or like a Dominion, but, something to help keep the storyline going. And eventually, I think this is going to lead to a Newman Osprey match in New Japan. I could
Yeah.
see that at like a Dominion show or an Osaka, maybe even, Wrestle Kingdom if Newman really gets over and business, starts picking up. So certainly something to keep an eye on. But, another very good AEW Dynamite. The ratings have been good. And even with the injuries right now, they're able to pivot. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they started planting the seeds the other day at Genesis. Will had the 6-man comeback match in Japan, after the bell, after they won, they were going to attack. And Will's like, no, no, no. And, because United Empire are basically heels now in New Japan. So, and then, Newman was going to use a chair in the main event. Will talked him out of it, but he still hits a low blow, right before he got the pin. So they started planting the seeds, at Genesis for Will Ospreay versus Callum Newman. I'm with you, Steve. I mean, I think it's going to be a long build. I think that could be, at Wrestle Kingdom, if that's the route they want to go. I mean, Will Ospreay could main event Wembley and Wrestle Kingdom, back to back. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and as we record this, it's about 5:45 Eastern Time, so Collision hasn't aired, but we're gonna run down the matches that happened. So we had an AEW International Title match. Kazuchika Okada picked up the win over Myron Reed. This was, I imagine, we haven't seen it yet, obviously, but this is a huge opportunity for Myron Reed, picking up his first AEW singles win, coming over from TNA, who was, basically a throw in to the Rascals in TNA and has really caught on and blended well with them. And going against, an all timer like Okada, great opportunity for him here.
Yeah, I mean, that kid's athletic. Okada can wrestle pretty much any style with anybody. So I expect it to be, a decent match. I didn't hear any reports specifically about how good the match was, but I'm sure it'll be perfectly fine for TV match.
And then we had a tag team match, the returning Hurt Syndicate. Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin with MVP pick up the win over Andy Anderson and Mo Jabari. So awesome to see the Hurt Syndicate back. Rumors that a new member is going to be joining the ranks. Any thoughts on who you could see as the new member in the Hurt Syndicate?
I haven't really thought too much about it, except I would hope it's a young guy, because, MVP well into his 50s. Bobby's and Shelton are both pushing 50. Uh, those guys have been around a really, really long time. So I hope it's, if they add somebody, I hope it's a younger guy that can get the rub from them.
Yeah, who I had in mind as a potential new member of the Hurt Syndicate. What about a Kevin Knight turning heel?
Yeah, I mean, young guy, athletic. We've talked about him numerous times about how impressive he is and how good he's gotten in a short period of time. So yeah, he would be good for that group. I don't hate that at all.
Yeah, I think back to those promos where he was trying to build up and he eventually got the eliminator match against MJF. His promo style and attitude just seems like it would fit in perfectly well with the Hurt Syndicate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's possible, especially which we'll talk about here in a few seconds here about the trios title match on this show.
Then we had the Casino Gauntlet #2 spot match. Roosh picked up the win over Anthony Bowens, so someone we've been talking about at great length over the last few weeks. Uh, Great spot for Anthony Bowens to even be in this match. We all know what Roosh can do, but with Bowens, attempting to join the ops, this was a great opportunity for him against a big star like Roosh.
I mean, I'm sure this match was probably solid. Reese is great. Bowens is great also in the ring. Good technical wrestler. So I expect this to be pretty good. I expect Bowens to be in that gauntlet as well.
Yeah, I would expect him and Caster in there.
Yeah.
Then we had a tag team match. Hikaru Shida and Chris Statlander defeated Ava Lawless and Gigi Ray. So interesting here to see Shida and Statlander teaming up. It almost looked like a couple weeks ago that when Shida returned, maybe we were going to be getting an evil Shida. So, her pairing up with Statlander, who's always been, tweening back and forth. Is she going to be heel? Is she going to be babyface? How's she going to play it? So, I could see this even being a match down the road on a Dynamite or a Collision.
Yeah, and something we forgot to touch on too during that Willow match with Queen Aminata, Sheeta just stood in the background the entire time with that crazy look on her face. So yeah,
Yeah.
something's building with her for sure.
Then we had a tag team match. This was the most interesting thing that I saw from the card. The Brawling Birds, Alex Windsor and Jamie Hayter, pick up the win over Marina Shafir and Tekla. So a little precursor for the pay-per-view. Interesting to see who got the win here. If Jamie picked up the win over Tekla or Windsor over Shafir. The other thing that stood out to me in this one is, I would watch with Marina how many losses we're giving her so quickly after building her up to make her look like a monster.
Yeah, I mean, I could see her. I mean, it's her and Alex on the pre-show. I could see Marina going over on Alex on this pre-show. You know, but I agree. They did build her up as a monster. For the female division. So I agree. Don't beat her too much.
Then we had a tag team match. The Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, going up against the Don Callis family. They picked up the win over El Clone and Hechicero. I'm always excited whenever we see Hechicero. I think he's one of the best wrestlers, to date. Him and Zack Sabre Jr. are probably two of the better technical wrestlers, along with Lee Moriarty. And, we've professed our love for the Young Bucks over and over on this podcast, especially Nick Jackson. So anytime you get to see them on, a TV taping, you're in for something good.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard about this entire show is that this supposedly was a really good match, which I'm not surprised at all. So we've talked about how great the Bucks are, and I fully expect the match, which we'll preview, for tomorrow night, will be off the charts with them.
Yeah, and the main event from tonight's Collision was an AEW World Trios title match. So we had the Dogs, Clark Connors, David Finley, and the recently returning Gabe Kidd picking up the win over Jet Speed, Kevin Knight and Mike Bailey, and Mystico to become the new AEW Trios champions. What are your thoughts on this title change?
Excited to see the match for sure. I don't hate the title change at all. I think it establishes the Dogs, in AEW, because they've been more recently featured, over in New Japan. So I like it. I think, like we touched on, this could be a possibility of maybe a Kevin Knight heel turn. Maybe there's a rematch. They're going to announce. I would be shocked if they don't announce matches, extra matches, additional matches for tonight for tomorrow night's pay per view. But I could see maybe a rematch here on the pre-show, possibly, and then there's some dissension. That's a route they could go, where they could do a rematch on Dynamite next week's Collision. So I think that could be possibly how they do it, but we'll see. See what happens.
Yeah, great opportunity for the Dogs. Connors, Finley, and Kidd. This really solidifies them as a real group and makes them important, gives them purpose, and puts them up against maybe a returning Hangman and the Young Bucks. Maybe the Hurt Syndicate gets involved in the trios titles. Maybe LFI from Ring of Honor, or maybe we can see the Dogs going against the CMLL trios champions, Dorada, Mystico, and Neon. That would be something interesting to see. And I know, Gabe Kidd in Japan is an awesome heel. Gabe Kidd in the US is an awesome heel. I'd love to see him in Mexico because I think they would absolutely eat Gabe Kidd alive, with his intensity, his different style, and definitely his mic work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there was a point where Gabe was just exclusively with the Death Riders. Now they've kind of branched him off, and now that they've got Connors and Finley here, I think they can do some real good things with that group. I wouldn't be surprised to see them add somebody to that group at some point too. Kind of be another faction, which is something that we've talked about with AEW, is they love their factions. So I'm good with it as long as they're all working in through intertwined through storylines, and it makes sense.
Imagine if, like how they did back in the day when New Japan had a young guy that they wanted and they sent him on an excursion to, just get experience. Imagine if they sent like Aaron Wolf and he was their, just their muscle and their bodyguard and, would just follow them around and just learn the business. I think something like that would be interesting to see.
I think they would probably book him better than Gato's booking him right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So another good week of AEW television. The ratings have been up Did you get to see any of the Tony Khan and Coach and Vince Russo podcast?
I did not, but I did read a few snippets. And from what I gather, it was a decent, a decent interview. I don't think they were too hard on each other from what I read. So
No, it was real, it was real cordial. It was a little weird in the beginning with Coach trying to get Tony to like look directly into the camera and everything. But, I think Tony enjoys wrestling so much and is a fan. He's able to talk to Russo about a lot of things that Russo was a part of. And, Tony obviously watches a lot of wrestling, and Russo's very big on JCW right now as an on-screen character and writing the show. So I think, that blend and the fact that Russo is dying to get some mainstream for JCW other than working with GCW, anything with AEW would be huge for them. And they have some talent there, but definitely a totally different show than what AEW brings to the table.
but yeah, for sure. I think Willie Mack's been working there, I think, pretty regularly from what I gather. But yeah, I mean, any exposure for them is good, and I think Tony, he's got enough people on that roster. If he can establish a decent relationship with them, he could probably send some people that aren't being used as much over to them.
Yeah, and him working with more and more companies is just putting him in a better light, especially coming off of, this week's news of TNA pulling wrestlers from advertised shows on indie shows. Did you have any thoughts on that news and, the wonderful publicity that Carlos Silva's getting this week?
If I had to guess, I mean, based on the history of these types of things happening in the past, I would say this was more of a WWE call than a TNA call, so just because they have the affiliation, I know TNA's taking the heat for it, but I would not be shocked if it was a WWE call. Here's the thing. They can do that, that's fine, but when you start canceling advertised matches, that there's probably some matches, that people specifically paid their money, get a ticket to go see that specific match, and now I think the big one was what, MJF against Dolph Ziggler.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's disappointing. You can do this, that's fine, that's your prerogative, but leave the advertised matches, let them happen, and then after it's over, then you can do your thing. So
Yeah, the other big one was the Ricochet and Leon Slater match that was
yeah.
scheduled to take place in like 6 days at the Mark Hitchcock Memorial Show. And I remember when that show got announced, I was totally shocked that it was even booked and that both parties agreed to it and supposedly agreed to a finish. But this is total WWE, like you said. This is their playbook to pull people like this. And we all know why TNA got that TV deal, which was their WWE partnership. We all know that WWE TKO is going to eventually absorb TNA at some point, the same way they did all of the indies in England and Europe to make that, NXT UK that went nowhere. And, it's just going to eat another place up that, you know, has some talent. But since they pulled the NXT talent, I feel like the TNA show has really suffered, pulling Trick Williams, losing Joe Hendry. Those are huge losses. They lost the Rascals. They lost Masha. They lost Danny Luna. It's been a lot of talent leaving TNA.
Yeah, I mean, I saw they were, was it last week? Abyss came back. You
Yep.
know, Chris Park, he's a writer for WWE, or producer
Yeah.
rather. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough when you have to do that. Like you said, losing talent like that, especially if you're in a working relationship. Why not? I mean, it's not like you're sending Roman Reigns over there to do a job. You know what I mean? So it doesn't make any
Yep.
sense.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with TNA. We're going to get into WrestleMania week next week. We'll touch on some of the big shows as well as our WrestleMania preview. But let's get into why we're here, and that's to preview tomorrow's AEW Dynasty pay-per-view. So to start it off, we have a singles match with the returning Chris Jericho versus Ricochet. This is going to be Chris Jericho's first match in over a year or pretty close to a year. And, he's looks to be in great shape, but great shape and not being in the ring for a year are two totally different things. How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, the angle that they did on Dynamite was great. Ricochet's back on the list. So they kind of reprised that from 10 years ago. But yeah, I'm with you, Steve. Jericho looks great physically. He's real lean. He's in good shape. I really think. I mean, he's such a pro. He's been around so long, and Ricochet is awesome. I think they'll have a good match. Not sure where the story's going here just yet. Could we see Jericho turn heel at some point? I don't know that he's going to do it on this particular show, but yeah, this will be interesting. I would fully expect Chris to win here if it's a true one-on-one match. If GOA gets involved, then that's a different story. So we'll see what happens. But if it's just a straight up singles match, I would expect Jericho to win his debut back.
Yeah, I expect Jericho to go over, and I'm hoping we get a short run of, the hits from Jericho, him going back to all of his good things like the list and, maybe even throwing it back to some WCW days, maybe get a new version of a newer Rufus to lead him to the ring. I think something like that would be fun. Even a short-term pairing back up with like Christian, maybe, the three veteran Canadians are together for a little bit. That would be something fun. And, Ricochet's one of the best. He's going to make Jericho look great, even if Jericho's not on his A game, because Ricochet will be able to dance around him and, should be starting off big things. Jericho's going to be featured heavily each and every week here going forward, I would imagine, because he's not getting paid, minimum money.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm looking forward to see where they're going with Chris. So we'll be all along for a ride, no doubt.
Then we have a tag team match that I think could absolutely steal the show. We have the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson versus the Don Callis family, Kazuchika Okada and Konosuke Takeshita. So we'll see how long Okada and Takeshita can work together, if one of them's going to pull a Rick Martel on the other, or if they're really going to, put it together for one match. But I expect this to be absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it's going to be a good match. I should say it's going to be a great match. I really think the Bucks go over here because the future for Takeshita and Okada is not tag team champions. So I think it's going to be a great match. Something's going to happen where, there's a miscue and one of them, hits the other one, lays the other one out or something, and then the Bucks get the win. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. I'd be shocked if the result is the other way, unless the Callis family gets involved to help them. But I think the Bucks should go over here.
Yeah, I think the Bucks are gonna win. I could see, Don Callis, choosing Okada in this match and slipping him the screwdriver, but instead of using it on the Bucks, he hits Takeshita with it, and that really jumpstarts their feud. And, I think it would be interesting. I'm excited to see them go one-on-one, but definitely excited to see them tag, and hopefully they can, put it together long enough for a really good match.
I agree. I think it's going to be a great match for sure.
Then we have the vacated AEW TNT title Casino Gauntlet match. So we know for sure the first two entrants are going to be Tommaso Ciampa and Roosh. So from there, could be anybody. We could see the Hurt Syndicate. We could see returning people, maybe a Mark Briscoe. Kyle O'Reilly has teased coming back. Maybe Isaiah Cassidy now that he's going to be a single star for a little bit. You mentioned it earlier. Maybe we get some people from New Japan, people from CMLL, maybe, someone we haven't seen on AEW TV that much, maybe a Bishop Dwyer who's been getting a lot of, publicity and run on social media. So a lot of ways they can go. I don't think Ciampa or Roosh are going to be the winners here. My personal pick for this is I think Speedball Mike Bailey is going to be the winner. And I could see this win along with their loss on Collision being what propels, Kevin Knight to be jealous. Maybe Speedball and Kevin Knight are the last two, and that starts to push Kevin Knight over the edge. And then we could see that, turn and him joining the Hurt Syndicate and then igniting the Kevin Knight Speedball feud that I've been talking about for, since the beginning of their, formation.
Yeah, I think that the nice thing about these types of matches are there's really no set person usually. I know TK always knows who he wants, but they usually book it in a way where you just really don't know because they only announced the first two people. So that's why I really like these types of matches. As long as it doesn't go too long, I think the pacing usually is pretty good. So I think anybody could come out with it. Like you said, I actually like the Mike Bailey idea. I think you could have Briscoe, Ciampa, any one of those guys win as well. So Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fun. Like I said, hopefully we get some surprises in there too.
Just imagine if Adam Cole makes his return here.
That'd be something. I mean, I haven't heard any talk about him coming back, but that would be something.
I mean, that would be the perfect time to pull it off. I don't know what his condition is, but like you said, nobody's talked about that. No one's even considered that. So I think something like that would be like the ultimate surprise.
Oh yeah, I mean that place would go crazy for that. He's been gone a while now. He's been with the concussions. Hopefully, I mean, I'd love to see him come back as long as he's medically able to.
Yeah, and he never lost the TNT title, so it would make perfect storyline success. The guy that injured him is now injured, so he gets the title back, and it's like we're where we were almost a year ago.
Yeah, I agree. It would be something to see.
Then we have the AEW Women's World Title match. Tekla, the champion, versus Jamie Hayter. These are two of my favorite AEW female performers. I'm hoping we get a great showing here from Jamie Hayter. I don't see this title changing hands at all here. I think Thekla's been on a great run, and Hayter and Windsor are destined for some good things as a tag team. But I would like to see Jamie just go out and have a really good match. I don't think she's really had that big showcase match, and I don't think she's looked as good as she was when she was last champion. And Tekla even made reference to that in her promo. So interesting backstory here, but I think it should be a good match.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to be a solid match. I don't expect them to take the belt off of her though. I think like we talked about last week, week before, let let her have a run, establish her as a top girl, and then that just makes that division stronger going forward. Jamie's already been world champion. Not that she can't be world champion again, but establish Tekla. I think Jamie is established. She was hurt for a while there, so she's on her way back through now. So I think it's going to be a good match, and I expect Tekla to pick up the win. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some interference in there too.
Yeah, could we get a Ronda appearance? It's getting closer to her big fight, so would make sense to make an appearance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that she would travel the whole way up to Canada for that. Maybe if I think they're in Seattle on Wednesday. Not that it's that much further, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think anything's possible. Especially with promotion of the fight coming up. So we'll see.
Then we have a match that I think could absolutely steal the show. Andrade El Idolo versus Darby Allin. Andrade has been on an absolute tear since, coming back from his, leaving WWE, coming back to AEW, not being allowed to wrestle. And I think Darby's going to win this match. I think we're destined for a Darby world title shot, but I would really like to see Andrade win because I think he's been on a great run. And I think him going for the world title, especially with, his displeasure of being associated with MJF. They teased it at House of Glory that we covered a couple weeks back. And, I'd like to see that momentum keep going. He gets great reactions at every show that he goes to and over.
I mean, we talked about Darby. You could book him as your world champion. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think what's probably going to happen based on the booking, you're probably going to get Darby a win here. He'll probably challenge. He will challenge for the world title then, and then I think we could probably see Andrade. Since he pinned Jack Perry, maybe he challenges for the national title. On a Dynamite, or you could even save that for Double or Nothing as well. But I think he would be a great guy to put that title on. And I think Darby's going to have a great match with MJF or Kenny Omega, whoever comes out. Yeah, I think Darby, you could put belt on him, but I just don't think he's in that mix right now. It could be a year or two down the line.
Yeah, I don't think Darby's going to be world champion anytime soon, but I definitely think a Darby MJF match, probably at Double or Nothing, would be something, worth seeing. And we know Darby's going to go out all out every time he is on TV. So I expect this to be nothing less than, a car crash.
Yeah, I mean they're going to work hard. It's going to be a good match. Andrade, that guy can go also. So and as well as Darby. So I think they have a little bit different styles. So I think they'll mesh well.
Then we have the AEW Continental Title match. Jon Moxley defends the title against the returning Will Ospreay. This will be interesting to see. It's going to be under continental rules, so nobody's going to be allowed at ringside. And this is going to be a 20-minute time limit. So, they're not going to have that normal Moxley Osprey 25 to 35-minute match. So they're going to have to get it in, which is also a good thing because it's going to protect Osprey from himself. But in 20 minutes, he could still do some crazy stuff. I expect Moxley to retain. I don't foresee Osprey being Continental Champion and moving forward with that title.
No, I agree. I think Moxley goes over here. They're going to build Will. He's gonna take a couple losses here, and then they're going to build him back up for Wembley. I think is the direction. But I did read something today. I don't know if it's true, but they'll probably confirm it tonight on Collision. But I did read that this might be a 60-minute time limit because it's on pay-per-view.
Huh.
I don't know. Like I said, it was just speculation. I don't know if that's true or not, but I guess we'll see. If it is a 60-minute time limit, I think they're going to go 30 at least.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could see Osprey winning the Owen Hart tournament. I would like to see Osprey, and this is Will's favorite thing to do, go on a losing streak and doubt himself and then go on a real heater and start winning everything in the tournament, have his back up against the wall, his neck surgery. He's going to be playing that up. He's going to do everything he can to get that, world title shot, especially in Wembley. Last year was, so huge for him and, going for the world title would be even bigger. And I think that would really boost their ticket sales that they need to see happen here in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I could definitely see him winning the Owen, like you said, and yeah, they need to make it clear. I think coming out of Double or Nothing, they need to make it crystal clear that he's going to probably be the guy, that's going to challenge.
And then we have the AEW World Tag Team title match. So FTR, Cash Wheeler, and Dax Hardwood with Stokely going up against the CNC Connection, Cage and Copeland. And that's Adam Copeland and Christian Cage. What do you think about this tag team title match, Joe?
I'm kind of mixed on it. I mean, I love FTR, and I think they should keep the belts, but I can see a part of Tony Khan wanting to say, years down the line that my tag team champions were Christian Cage and Adam Copeland, kind of as maybe a middle finger to WWE in a way. I don't think I'm good with them winning. I think it needs to be a brief title run. I don't want to see I don't want to see them with the belts for like a year, couple months, maybe flip them. Maybe they flip them at Double or Nothing. You might get to see that too, but I'm okay. I'm okay either way they go. But I really think that Cage and Copeland are going to walk out of here with belts.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a title change here. What I've speculated is I think Cage and Copeland win this match, and then at Double or Nothing, we see them go against the Young Bucks. And I would anticipate FTR getting involved in that. And that's setting up for Wembley, a three-way TLC match, an inkling to the past of Cage and Cope. And we get FTR, Young Bucks, and, Cage and Copeland in a triple threat tag team ladder match, which would be absolutely something to see. The kings of the tag team ladder matches, Cage and Copeland. Who knows? Maybe even by then the Hardys contracts are up and they could rejoin AEW, which is what everybody would really want to see, and that would really certainly sell some tickets. But, I expect Cage and Cope to win the titles and hang on to them till Wembley. And that's where I would expect to see a change.
Yeah, I don't hate that scenario. Like I said, I don't want them to be champs for a year, but yeah, going into Wembley would be a good scenario. And I like having the triple threat ladder match. That's a great idea. I'm all for that, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge selling point. I mean, we know Cage and Copeland are going to go all out. I mean, look at one of the last times Cage had a big time match like that, when he went against Aleister Black and broke his foot jumping off a ladder
Yeah.
trying to put him through a table. So I could definitely see that coming, and we know FTR and the Young Bucks, they're going to go all out in any match that they're in. So it would be fantastic.
Agreed.
Then we have our main event, and this is the match I'm most conflicted on. We have the reigning defending AEW World Champion, MJF Maxwell Jacob Friedman, taking on the best bout machine, the cleaner, Kenny by God Omega, for the world title. My heart says I want Kenny Omega to win, My brain says I want MJF to keep the title and be champion forever because, he's MJF. And the business mind of me says things are rolling, things are great. Why in the hell would we want to change the world champion right here? What do you say,
Yeah.
Joe?
I'm with you there. I mean, I think it's going to come down to what does Tony Khan, what does Kenny Omega, and what does, Brian Danielson and Matt and Nick Jackson, what do they think is going to be the bigger draw at Wembley Stadium? Because at the end of the day, those are the guys that are kind of calling the shots. You do babyface to babyface and expect a 7-star match, or do you want the heel that's hot and have Osprey chase the heel? So that's the decision that they're in right now, is what's going to be the best match at Wembley Stadium. So I think this match goes either way, and I agree actually 100% with how you feel, because, I want to see Kenny with another go round. But at the same time, like you said, the company's hot right now. They're drawing well on TV and pay-per-view. So do you pull the belt off your top heel? That's a tough one, and I don't even have a prediction. It's going to be a good match, and we'll just have to see where they go, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you could realistically go with either of these guys and have a good story because let's be honest here. We all feel that one half of the main event at Wembley is going to be Will Ospreay. You know, everybody's, betting their life on that. So if we're going with the thought of Will Ospreay is going to be in that main event spot, let's look at the two guys here because, in most of AEW's history, the world champion stays the world champion for at least 3-4 months.
Right.
Most recently, Hangman losing it, after winning it from Moxley, then to Joe. That was like the quickest we've ever seen a world title change in
Yeah.
AEW. So if we keep it with MJF, I think MJF and Will Ospreay is going to be a huge match. You have the ultimate heel and the ultimate babyface going into a showdown with your ultimate heel being on absolute fire, going through everybody and, being able to say, he put down Hangman, he put down Omega, and he's going to put down Osprey. That's a huge selling point there. And then you also have Kenny Omega, who has the long-term history with Will Osprey. They're 1-1. So you could definitely go with that because Omega beat Osprey in Japan. Osprey beat Omega in America. Now they're doing it on Osprey's hometown. And, I expect Osprey to leave as world champion after Wembley. So either of those matches would be, great selling points. But the thing that worries me the most is one, you have Osprey coming off a huge injury and an injury that normally takes about 12 months to be fully healed. He did it in like 6 months. So is he really healed? And is that a chance you're willing to take? And if you go Omega as well, he's had a real injury problem the last few years. So, you have two risks right there. And you have MJF, who's, knock on wood, never really been hurt. He's taken time off because he's MJF and he does movies and he doesn't wrestle every week. But it's almost that MJF is the safer pick and he's going to be there and he's more reliable. And I think with good business going on right now and this potential, takeover from, Paramount to Warner Discovery, AEW has to keep rolling at a high level because there's so much uncertainty in the future. I don't think AEW is ever going to not exist unless Tony Khan doesn't want it to exist because money's not really a problem for Tony Khan and, his father. So that's not the concern, but where they're going to be housed, that is a concern coming up in about a year or two.
Yeah, they need to stay hot, not to go too much in depth on that, but yeah, I mean you're correct. They need to stay hot. They need to keep the ball rolling because with that sale and merger, there's no telling what's going to happen. Especially with all the rights fees now, everything's all these platforms now. You have Paramount Plus and you have HBO Max that have UFC and AEW on them. Would AEW be on the same platform as UFC? And then you have you know ESPN has WWE right now. Peacock is still airing SmackDown, the replays of SmackDown because USA Networks with NBC. So it's a wild time. And like you said, all these companies know a year or two out from rights fees, they got to be hot in order to get the best deal. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year or two here coming up.
Yeah, and you mentioned this earlier that we think a couple more matches could be added to this pay-per-view.
Yeah,
I mean, when you look at this is a really stacked card. This is a good show, but on AEW's terms, this is not their normal 4.5 hour show. So I am excited that if this is the final card, this is great because these matches are going to get more time. They're going to get, time to breathe, and we're going to be able to not be like bang, 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 one after another.
yeah,
So that would be exciting to have it be just an eight, card match and a couple pre-show matches, maybe a trios title defense or, maybe a Ring of Honor, TV title match or a Ring of Honor, title match on the pre-show. Something like that would be fun, but, keeping it short and sweet like this would be certainly a change, but, a good change to switch it up, especially on a Sunday night. I've said it before. I love when AEW does the afternoon pay-per-views. I think it bodes better for the East Coast audience, especially on just a regular Sunday night.
yeah. I think we could see one or two matches, and I would put them on the pre-show. I think some of those pre-shows, especially if people tune in right away, there's just so much talking and video recaps. Give them a little bit of something extra. Especially if they're gonna make you sit there for what hour and a half. I think they've been doing hour and a half shows lately, but yeah, I mean, but it is Tony Khan, so you never know. He could throw something on the main show too. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, he could wake up tomorrow morning and just get a couple ideas, and we're off and running, and we got a 14 card pay per view like we normally do with three pre-show matches and three more matches added to the main show. So it'll be interesting. But tomorrow night, it's going to be AEW Dynasty heading into the absolute biggest week of the year in wrestling. This is going to be the starter. Later tonight, this is Saturday, so we got TNA Rebellion going on, so that's going to be a big show for them. And we're off and running next week, so that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast. We came in hot. We broke down Dynamite, Collision, and everything you need to know heading into Dynasty. And somewhere along the way, we probably started at least 3 arguments we're not ready to apologize for. And a huge shout out to Joe for jumping into the chaos and making this a full on tag team, no rules, no filter, just straight wrestling talk the way it's supposed to be.
Yes, sir. But listen, if you thought that this week was big, next week we're leveling up. We're going full nostalgia, full hype, and full chaos.
We're dropping a WrestleMania retrospective special, looking back at some of the most iconic moments, matches, and eras that made WrestleMania what it is today.
And then we flip the switch and get you ready for the biggest show of the year with the WrestleMania preview show, breaking down the card, the storylines, the winners, the losers, and the moments that could define the next year in wrestling.
It's history, it's predictions, it's legacy, all in one episode. And we'll catch you next time on the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast. Okay, serious question. How do people let everyone know they're listening to the hottest wrestling podcast in the game?
That's easy. They stop yelling it at strangers in Target and they go to Pro Wrestling Tees.
Boom. See? Growth, maturity, merch?
That's right. The official Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast shirts are live. Fresh design, soft tees, drip approved.
Perfect for WrestleMania watch parties.
Perfect for AEW, WWE, TNA, and even New Japan Pro Wrestling pay-per-views.
Perfect for when you're cutting a promo in your living room.
Or when you're reminding your spouse you were right about that heel turn.
I was right.
Debatable.
What's not debatable? You need this shirt.
Head over to Pro Wrestling Tees and grab yours now.
Support the podcast.
Rep the brand.
And join the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling family.